The South Korean government says it'll inject an additional $14.7 billion into boosting private consumption and regenerating the local economy using a supplementary budget. In the Middle East, Israel hit a key Iranian nuclear site, and Iran hammered the main hospital in southern Israel on Thursday, while the United States' possible involvement in the conflict remains up in the air. The U.S. Federal Reserve on Wednesday left its key interest rate unchanged for the fourth time in a row, hinting at least 2 rate cuts within the year. South Korea has drawn up its first extra budget under the brand new government, with the ultimate goal of stimulating economic recovery. And the budget also includes cash handouts to all citizens. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
The second round of a supplementary budget bill this year, the first of its kind under Lee Jae-myung's presidency, has been drafted and is set to go to the National Assembly next week. President Lee, presiding over a cabinet meeting on Thursday, took a final look.
작년 12월 3일 이후로 심리적 위축이 심해서 있던 손님도 얼마 안 되던 손님도 다 떨어져 나갔다고 현장에서 너무 어려워합니다. 다행히 최근에는 조금 분위기가 개선되고 있긴 한데 어쨌든 본질적으로 우리 서민기업, 서민들이 겪는 고통이 매우 큰 것 같아요. 국가 재정을 이제 사용할 때가 됐습니다.
The size of this supplementary budget is 30.5 trillion Korean won, or a bit more than 22 billion US dollars. 15.2 trillion of that will be going into boosting the economy through stimulus. 5 trillion will be going to stabilizing people's livelihoods. 10.3 will be for revenue adjustment for the nation's fiscal situation. This means 20.2 trillion will be for direct spending by the government, with 19.8 trillion being debt. Going into the details, 15.2 trillion for economic stimulus will consist of 10.3 trillion of that being relief to everyone in a different form of the recipient's choosing. 1 trillion will go into boosting discounts and other needed aspects. 2.7 will go into support for the construction sector, as it's currently one of the hardest hit industries, with close links to the employment of working-class citizens. President Lee has been pushing for cash relief to everyone for some time now since his lawmaker days. But then conservative government have been saying a universal payout is not right due to the financial pressure on the nation's fiscal status, and selective support is better.
만약 이제 일반 원칙으로요. 만약에 우리가 어떤 제도를 시행하는 데 필요한 경비다 이게 라고 하면 그 경비 지출에 따라서 이익을 혜택을 보는 반사적 이익을 보는 사람은 누구여야 하느냐? 그건 가난한 사람이어야 하느냐? 아니면 세금을 많이 내는 부자여야 하느냐? 저는 어떤 필요에 의해서 경비를 지출한다고 하면 그 반사적 혜택은 최소한 국민들이 공평하게 혜택을 누리는 게 맞다고 생각해요.
The draft did go with a universal payout, but for those who need it, the more they will receive. The top 10%, approximately 5.12 million people, will receive a one-time payment of 150,000 Korean won, or around $100 US. And the biggest group of citizens, of around 43 million people, will receive the first payment of 150,000 Korean won, but will get an additional 100,000 in the second round. The lower levels will receive more in first-time payments, with the social welfare recipients later getting 500,000 in total. As for stabilizing livelihoods, money will be spent on debt relief for small businesses, as well as boosting employment and taming inflation. Now the ball is in the National Assembly's court, with the government's draft being transferred on the 23rd. Lawmakers will be reviewing the bill, but with the ruling Democratic Party holding the majority on the floor, the bill won't face many obstacles. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now we have our Kim Do-yeon in the studio to give us more details on this supplementary budget bill. Good evening, Do-yeon.
Good to be here.
So Do-yeon, the spending vouchers for Korean nationals has been a hot topic for the entire nation, as it affects every Korean national, including us, both of us.
Right.
Tell us more.
Right, I mean, it's something, as I've said in the report, that President Lee has been pushing for since his opposition leader days. And as we heard, he believes strongly in the government spending more during these hard times with benefits going to everyone. Also, this is to boost spending. One thing to clarify is that it's not in the form of cash, it's spending vouchers. So there are 3 ways to receive them: local district vouchers, a prepaid check card, or directly to your credit or check card. Now, it will be to boost domestic spending, so it's not for those who are going to travel abroad. Also, while the specifics aren't out yet, they are going to have an expiration date. So far, the government has said 4 months, but that detail will be decided at the National Assembly. On top of this, there will be other discounts to make sure people spend more here in Korea.
We aim to achieve both goals, providing swift support through phased payments and tailoring assistance based on income levels. An additional 600 billion won will also be allocated for local gift certificates, bringing the total issuance to a record high 29 trillion won. The discount rate when purchasing these certificates will also be raised from a maximum of 10% to 15%.
Doyeon, let's focus on the government's financial status. Now, I do have to say some people may be worried about the additional debt. What does the government have to say about that?
Right, the government did admit that the debt had risen and the fiscal balance rose. But take a listen to the second Vice Minister for Economy and Finance again.
However, looking at past cases and international comparisons, we don't see the current level as posing a serious risk just yet. Efforts to ensure fiscal sustainability will continue in parallel.
The government says it tried to be careful with the financing for this supplementary budget. It secured 5.3 trillion won by reshuffling spending priorities and another 5.5 by tapping into available funds and adjusting how much will be issued in foreign exchange bonds. That allowed them to keep additional bond issuance to 19.8 trillion won, minimizing the burden on taxpayers. Still, despite those efforts, the fiscal deficit widened from 3.3% to 4.2% of GDP, and the national debt ratio also inched up. But the finance ministry says that what's more important right now is responding to urgent economic needs.
Indeed, Doyeon, thank you for coming in and for that thorough wrap-up.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in other news, the cabinet on Thursday passed an enforcement decree to implement the revised Special Act in support of scientists and engineers for strengthening national science and technology competitiveness. Senior Presidential Secretary for AI and Future Planning, Ha Jung-woo, said the decree will lay out the groundwork for more support across the science and engineering fields, starting with outreach programs to spark interest among younger students. It also promotes quality education and research at the university level, including reforms to research systems and training aligned with industry needs. Now, national guidelines for postdoctoral researchers will be standardized to improve hiring, career development, and research conditions. The decree takes effect this Saturday. And President Lee Jae-myung is set to meet with the leader of the ruling party as well as the leader of the main opposition party this Sunday. Senior Presidential Secretary for Political Affairs Woo Sang-ho told reporters on Thursday that the president will host a luncheon at the presidential residence with the Democratic Party acting leader and floor leader Kim Byung-gi, People Power Party interim leader Kim Yong-tae, and the party's floor leader Song Han-seok. The president will share his experience from the recent G7 summit in Canada and engage in what the top office described as a frank and open dialogue with no set items on the agenda. Israel and Iran have continued to go back and forth with airstrikes for an entire week now. And U.S. President Donald Trump is delaying a decision on his country's military involvement. Our Moon Hae-ryun reports.
7 days into Israel's military campaign against Iranian nuclear and missile facilities, cross-border attacks are escalating. On Thursday morning local time, an Iranian missile struck Israel's main southern hospital, causing what officials described as extensive damage. This came as Israel targeted a heavy water reactor southwest of the Iranian capital, with Iranian state media reporting that the facility had been evacuated ahead of the strike and that no civilian areas were affected. Israel had issued a warning earlier in the day, stating its intention to strike the site and urging residents to evacuate. The latest air assaults come amid uncertainty over possible U.S. involvement in the conflict. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Wednesday local time, U.S. President Donald Trump said that he had yet to make a final call and he would hold off doing so for now.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
Shortly afterwards, he convened a second White House Situation Room meeting in as many days to discuss the agenda with his national security advisors. The talks lasted for around an hour, and it is not yet clear what was discussed or whether any decisions were made. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump told senior aides late Tuesday that he had approved plans for a potential military strike on Iran, but decided to pause, hoping Tehran might still give up its nuclear program. Earlier in the day, Trump claimed that Iran had proposed to come to the White House to begin negotiations and once again called for unconditional surrender. In response, Iran's diplomatic mission to the United Nations in New York hit back on social media by saying that no Iranian official has asked to grovel at the gates of the White House, followed by a message from Iran's supreme leader himself.
The Iranian nation stands firm against the imposed war, as it has stood so far, and stands firm against the imposed peace. The Iranian nation will not surrender to anyone in the face of imposition.
As tensions intensify, nations are moving to evacuate their own nationals from Israel. The U.S. State Department has started pulling out non-essential diplomats and is arranging evacuation flights and ships for American citizens, while China is also working to evacuate its citizens. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And a group of South Korean nationals in Iran has been safely evacuated to Turkmenistan amid intensifying military clashes between Israel and Iran. As Seoul's Foreign Ministry said Thursday, some 20 individuals, including 18 South Korean nationals and 2 Iranian family members, departed from Tehran and traveled around 1,200 kilometers for some 30 hours to reach Iran's eastern border checkpoint. The ministry provided charter buses and assisted with the border procedures, as well as other necessary consular support. Seoul also sent a rapid response team to Turkmenistan to help with accommodation and assistance in arranging return flights. Following this evacuation, around 90 Koreans remain in Iran. The government stated that it stands ready to provide additional consular support and evacuation assistance upon request. Its travel advisories for Iran and Israel are both at level 3, which recommends Korean nationals leave. Seoul has called on Moscow to play a constructive role in promoting peace on the Korean peninsula and immediately end illegal military cooperation with North Korea. Upon the 1-year mark of Russia and North Korea's mutual security pact, a South Korean government official expressed a grave concern over continued violations of UN Security Council resolutions, saying any agreements between the two sides must fully comply with international law. South Korea intends to continue efforts to achieve progress toward peace on the peninsula and resolving North Korea's nuclear threat. The official added Seoul urges Pyongyang to respond positively to these efforts and calls on Russia to assume a constructive role in promoting peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. The U.S. Federal Reserve officials held on to their key interest rates yet again on Wednesday, but they still foresee 2 rate cuts by the end of the year. Moon Ji-young tells us more.
The U.S. Federal Reserve kept its key rate unchanged for the 4th straight meeting Wednesday and lowered the country's economic growth outlook. This keeps the rate in the 4.25 to 4.5% range and marks the 4th consecutive rate freeze since Trump took office, despite pressure to make cuts.
What we're waiting for to reduce rates is to understand what will happen with really the tariff inflation. And there's a lot of uncertainty about that.
So far, inflation has remained relatively tame near the Fed's target of 2%. However, economists warn it may take months for the effects of tariff to be felt. Inflation has also seen recent upward pressure from rising oil prices driven by the conflict between Israel and Iran. However, Fed officials still foresee 2 interest rate cuts by the end of this year, the same as they projected in March. The central bank's latest quarterly projections show noticeably weaker growth, higher inflation, and slightly higher unemployment by the end of this year than it had forecast in March. For this year, Fed officials expect inflation to rise to 3%, unemployment to increase to 4.5%, and growth to slow to 1.4%. The Fed also projects GDP to grow by 1.4% in 2025, down from 1.7% projected in March.
Following growth of 2.5% last year, GDP was reported to have edged down in the first quarter, reflecting swings in net exports that were driven by businesses bringing in imports ahead of potential tariffs.
President Donald Trump has publicly criticized Powell for not cutting rates, increasing pressure on the central bank. But the Fed chairman dismissed criticism, saying, quote, "We are in a good place." Meanwhile, this week's decision puts the benchmark rate gap between South Korea and the U.S. at up to 2 percentage points, with the Bank of Korea slashing its key rate to 2.5% at its last meeting in May. On the same day, Bank of Korea Deputy Governor Park Jong-woo noted the Fed chairman's cautious policy approach, influenced by U.S. tariff policy and divergent views among officials. Speaking at a meeting on macroeconomic issues, he also highlighted the growing uncertainty regarding the future path of U.S. monetary policy. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Also in the U.S., the State Department says it's restarting student visa applications for foreigners, but under the condition that all applicants make their social media accounts public for review. Yoon-hee reports.
The U.S. State Department is resuming the process for foreign nationals applying for student visas following a temporary suspension last month. But according to a statement released Wednesday, applicants will now be required to provide information about their social media profiles. All applicants will be asked to set the privacy settings on all their social media profiles to public. New guidance directs U.S. diplomats to look for any indications of hostility toward the citizens, culture, government, institutions, or founding principles of the United States. Failure to comply may be seen as an attempt to evade screening or as an effort to conceal online activity. This policy applies to students and other applicants for visas in the F, M, and J categories, which refer to academic and vocational education as well as cultural exchanges. The temporary pause in visa interview scheduling last month was prompted by the U.S. evaluating new social media vetting procedures, leaving students worldwide anxious. The New York Times commented that the guidelines' vague parameters will no doubt create much uncertainty among American universities and students and scholars overseas who intend to travel to the United States. It also wrote that critics say such a process and other related actions by Secretary of State Marco Rubio are aimed at limiting free speech, enforcing certain beliefs, and pressuring foreign citizens to censor themselves and refrain from criticizing the Trump administration. Meanwhile, according to a senior State Department official, the Trump administration is working to make America safer, acting on citizen expectations, and that Marco Rubio was helping to make America and its universities safer while bringing the State Department into the 21st century. Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
Now, back on the local front, young overseas Koreans are taking part in a special program here aimed at offering them the opportunity to delve into their roots. An Sung-jin has the story.
7.5 million. That's how many overseas Koreans there are. Gathered here are around 240 next-generation overseas Koreans aged 15 to 18. This teen camp, hosted by the Overseas Korean Agency and organized by the Overseas Koreans Cooperation Center, has participants from 26 countries.
For these students, by visiting their parents' country, they can really feel their Korean heritage. Our ultimate goal is to increase the budget for such programs so we can invite more participants.
Especially as 2025 is the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation, these students are delving into learning about their history and roots.
Programs like these offer the opportunity for overseas Koreans to experience Koreans' history, culture, and society while helping them build connection with younger people in the country.
For some, the 7-day program starts with a visit to Seodaemun Prison History Hall, which gives them a chance to understand Japan's colonial era and reflect on their background. For 15-year-old Sophia, this was an opportunity to fulfill her interests and ties with her Korean roots.
My grandmother was born in Korea, but it so happened that they were deported in train cars to Kazakhstan. Just in the cold, they were thrown like that. They started working at coal mines, and life began to improve for them. It's my first time in Korea, but I really like it here, and I will definitely come again in the future and maybe study here.
And at the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History, students look back at the country's past to strengthen ties and raise awareness of their Korean identity.
I know one of my great-grandfathers on my grandmother's side was a war veteran after the knock-on for the Korean military. I feel like it shows a lot of courage, and that courage is often seen throughout my family, I believe. That's one of the main reasons why I've come to Korea.
This program for the summer will run until August, not only for teens, but also for those aged up to 24 as well, to foster overseas Koreans as global leaders who embrace and uphold their Korean heritage. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The heat is at its peak today. The daytime temperature in Seoul rose up to 33 degrees. Wonju, Cheongju, and Gyeongju 34 degrees, which is even higher than at the same time yesterday. Rain will spread to the Seoul metropolitan area, Chungcheongbuk-do province, and Jeollanam-do province tonight and spread to all over the country tomorrow. Heavy rain of up to 150 millimeters is expected in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province, Gangwon-do province, Chungcheongnam-do province, and Jeollabuk-do province, and 120 millimeters or more in other Seoul metropolitan area. Tomorrow morning will start warm at around 22 to 23 degrees all over the country. Daily highs will move up to 25 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon, and Busan, 28 degrees in Jeju. Rain in the central parts of the country will gradually stop on Saturday, but this rainy season will continue in the south for the time being. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami, and for all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.